And you can see our 8 kind of main bullet points here and areas of discussion. We'll review the resources that I just mentioned, talk a little bit about specifically tournament management and the consistency and communication needed to go with that. We've got Tony, I'm seeing Tony and John here from working with track wrestling, and so they'll talk a little bit about some upcoming steps for coaches, but also what to expect with track wrestling around weight certification, seating, and running your event. A little bit about some medical protocols and substitution protocols, 2 general bits of information and information for qualifying schools. Laura's going to take us home today, if you will, with a number of slides for our tournament managers on using the website to publicly display and post information for all of the different people that will be using our website here as we move forward. Documents and resources available to you that you and section managers should and need to have available. Of course, the federation rules. Make sure that you have copies of that rule book, that it's there, it's ready to be referenced and resourced. If there are questions on rule interpretation in advance of your tournament or preceding the tournament, we have an outstanding team of rules clinicians across the state, and we can assist in identifying those rules. We have a rules and policies document for every sport. And in the wrestling section, activity section on our website, at the very bottom of that page, you will find those rules and policies. Wrestling has a great deal of information in their rules and policies, policies related to weight certification, policies related to allowances, to match limits, and of course the establishing the weight for the section and state tournaments as well. So it's a breadth of information. It's available to everybody that's interested in wrestling through our website, and certainly available to you as section managers in that same location. 2 documents that I will say aren't necessarily ours, but they have been created to assist tournament managers throughout wrestling. And one is a track wrestling cheat sheet that's going to be available to you soon. You won't have that today. We are waiting for track wrestling to update, brackets or tournament information, and get those events built. But once that has happened, that sheet will be available to you, I believe, in a direct email from John. And then also a section state tournament frequently asked questions guide. This is a great document, not only for you as tournament managers, but also a resource for coaches as they bring participants into that section tournament and state tournament as well. Just these are questions that happen routinely, that we get consistently, and if there's a way that we can communicate those in advance and eliminate the number of phone calls that or emails that you have to respond to as a tournament manager, or the number of the same that might come into our office. It's a super helpful document. And then of course, emergency protocols and emergency action plans. And I think about what the entire world was able to witness here just last week in that Buffalo Bills and that National Football League game. And it calls to attention the necessity of having an emergency action plan. And we do such a tremendous job in Minnesota, in our schools, at our contests, at our tournaments, of being prepared to respond in the event of an emergency. And so I just want to take a little extra moment here to put in that plug that this season is going to be no different. In the wake of this very public event, we are all reminded of that importance. And here's just an interesting fact. We had a liaisons meeting today, and of the ADs that were on that call, 75% said they have had to use an emergency response plan at some point during their tenure as an activities administrator. And so the better prepared and planned we are at each of our sites, the better chance we have for positive outcomes. Suze, we can move forward. Talk a little bit about the tournament management. Yes, the section and state tournaments, they do belong to us in the high school league and by extension our regions. But please know that if there are any issues, that we always want to start locally at the site where those events are taking place with that local site manager. Those early rounds, if there are any issues, site managers can report to the tournament manager, to the region secretary who can report to me. It's always a little uncomfortable as a recovering AD whose job and mission it is to assist people and to help. It's always uncomfortable for me to see my name at the end of that list. And the reason is not because I don't want to get involved in your issues and working towards solutions that you may need at your local site level. It's just that it's not appropriate for me to do so. Those are really region decisions, and it needs to start with your tournament manager and region secretary if it's necessary, or there needs to be clarification or interpretation from the league because of confusion or whatever circumstances may present themselves. Certainly, I'm going to be willing to step in and be involved. So again, just please adhere to that chain of communication and chain of command. Tournament managers, again, be familiar with rules and policies, know that document well. These are the things above and beyond the National Federation contest rules that ensure fairness and equity between schools that are participating in our section tournaments. And then confirm that the teams that are assigned to your section are planning to participate or in some cases allowed to participate. Remember, we do have bylaw language that says teams must have a minimum of 3 interscholastic contests during the regular season to qualify for the postseason. I have not heard that that's been a question for any of our schools or teams thus far. But as tournament managers, look at the teams that have been assigned to you and ensure that they meet that bylaw requirement. Continuing with section consistency and communication, please provide your site staff with the section manager's guide. Any notes that you take, you can direct them to this presentation, which as Susie mentioned early on in the meeting, it will be recorded. Point them towards their section documents in the dashboard. And Laura will review kind of how that looks for different personnel here as we get towards the end of this meeting. Any key points, rules, policies, other pieces of information that might be pertinent with your tournament and staff based on your unique location, your unique schedule, and those things as you look to administer your section tournament. At the state level, we do a lot better in administering our state events when we have consistency at the section level. And so just a few ways that we can work to ensure that consistency is following the rules and policies. Some examples that I put here in C1 through 4, 21 in uniform with the team competition, 3 coaches that must be school approved. And please know that those school approved coaches, they're meeting state law and also league board policy requirements. And so just making late changes or late adds to the coaching staffs, the more communication and enforcement you can do there prior to the section tournament, the better you are working to protect schools who may not have coaches that meet those requirements. And the better we will be able to administer the state meet. As Susie well knows, we have a handful of coaches every year that are sitting in, outside the entrance of the pass gate at the Xcel Energy Center, completing their online requirements. And so just assist us in creating that expectation and making that communication. And know that one student assistant or student manager outside of the 21 in uniform would be allowed as well. And also take note of often overlooked part of bylaw 206, and that's 206.6. And what this says is that an ineligible student may not be in uniform, they may not be in the bench or occupy the playing area. They cannot receive awards during the section or state tournament. That is different than how that is administered or what is allowed during the regular season. And so coaches are often surprised by this. But again, it is one of our bylaws. And we want to prevent students who have perhaps engaged in conduct unbecoming of a high school wrestler or a representative of the school or the state high school league. We want to prevent them from having a platform when in fact they are not eligible to participate in that sport. And if there are any questions as you get closer to tournament time or you receive questions and need assistance in responding, please reach out to Susie and or myself, and we will assist you in a proper response. All right, at this point, I'm going to just make a couple of comments and I'll turn this over to John and Tony to talk a little bit about track wrestling and some important information. Obviously, this has become such a crucial tool in so many aspects. I mean, we use track wrestling to administer board policy when it comes to weight certification and establishing postseason weights. We also use it to administer and score the meets as they happen. And so we've become pretty reliant. And I know for one, I'm thankful for both John and Tony. Please know that we are going to work to assist our coaches in entering information correctly. As of January 15th, coaches are required to enter their weigh-ins into track wrestling to assist in establishing that postseason minimum weight. And they're going to help coaches. We've had, I'll say from Tony and John, they've worked through some really challenging data errors in the last couple of years, and we're hoping we can assist coaches in avoiding that. But with that, I'm going to turn over to John and Tony right now to talk to us a little bit about track wrestling and share information they have.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Susie, can you, yeah, thank you. Leave it on that slide there. So most of you have done tournaments with track wrestling before, so I'm not going to go through every little thing, but just some highlights. Charlie spoke to the data errors that Tony and I deal with at the end of the season. Obviously, if the data in track is not accurate, then we don't get accurate minimum wrestling weights for the wrestlers. So we're trying to head things off at the pass here a little bit this year and doing two very short 15-minute, 20-minute tutorials for coaches the following 2 Mondays. So the 16th and the 23rd at 7 p.m. just to show coaches where those problem areas are so that we don't get crushed right before section time like we have in past years. As far as the weight certifications and minimum wrestling weights, you're going to be getting a report from either Tony or myself during the week before your team section tournament that will list every wrestler on each team and what their minimum wrestling weight will be. So you'll have that to use as a resource. You should remember that information should be given to all coaches so that they know that. In the past, there's been some confusion there, but again, those reports should be shared with each of the coaches in your section so they can see them. One another problem area, weight certification. Some athletes maybe get injured or ineligible during the season and they don't weigh in at all. That is a pain to deal with, but there is a process. So if that is the case, then they would go through Susie and Charlie and we can work from there. When possible, encourage a coach with this situation to get that athlete one weigh in at some point during that January 15th to the end of the season period, because it makes things a lot easier for Charlie to look at. Couple other notes here. First, make sure that Susie has your best email to use for contact information, because that's what Tony and I will use to send out links to the cheat sheet and anything else we need to communicate with you about. We also need to know the name and email address and phone number of whoever is running the computer for you for the track wrestling part of your section tournaments. So email that directly to myself or Tony, and that'll help quite a bit. Like I said, we'll send a link to the cheat sheet and also the logins for you and the computer operators to use to get into your section team and individual tournaments. We'll do that in a couple of weeks once track has all of the tournaments set up and ready to go. In that cheat sheet, one pain point we've seen in the past, and this has to do directly with you, is the seeding process for the individual section tournament. There are very specific directions in there on how to use the seeding module in track wrestling for the postseason. It is much, much different than what you do during the season. So please follow those directions super carefully so that we don't get bad data and bad results. And if you have questions on that, please contact Tony or myself. And if your last name is Queasley, contact Tony or myself. Then I guess that's kind of the last thing. Some of our stuff will be in the FAQs that get sent out as well. But if you guys have any questions, just feel free to contact Tony or me and we'll get you straightened out.
Thanks, John. Before we start in on slide 8, Mark Queasley, I'd just like to bring you in and maybe offer an opportunity for you to clean up any gross misstatements that I've made, or to provide some clarifying remarks.
Well, thank you for allowing me to talk after John. Just a reminder that wrestlers, even if they're injured, can weigh in after January 15th and record a weigh-in. It can be during a meet invite. Again, wrestlers can get on the scale, record a weigh-in, and they don't necessarily have to wrestle in that event, but you can weigh them in. Last year, we had a couple of situations where we had some athletes who were ejected during the section tournament. Remember, if they're ejected or a coach is ejected, they cannot be part of the awards ceremony or get on the podium. So you just have to kind of troubleshoot, triage that as those items come along. From time to time, we have coaches that want to negotiate true second matches, and those always should be 2-2-2 in periods. Those are championship matches. They are not wrestleback matches anymore. So please be advised that coaches cannot change that as well. We also have section girls wrestling happening February 11th at Sartell and at Hastings. Susie sent out a questionnaire yesterday to all member schools that have that. We're waiting to see what we have truly for registration numbers in each one of those 8 sections before we determine how many girls or how we're going to format those sites on that day. We've got some options there, but there is a match limitation for boys and girls tournament at postseason, and you cannot go over 5 matches in a given day. So that's why we're looking very closely at this girls tournament and girls format to see what we can do with that piece of it. Again, as soon as we have some better information out about the numbers for girls wrestling, we will take care of that and get that information out to member schools. There has been some confusion about the number of events for girls wrestlers. Girls wrestlers get 16 events. Boys wrestlers get 16 events, 45 matches. Now, girls, we can have 4 of those events be girls only. This year, weigh-ins can be shoulder to shoulder again, and everybody can have a singlet or should have a singlet, must have a singlet on. So boys and girls can weigh in together at your site. I am going to recommend that you do your med checks, your skin checks before your weigh-ins during your team tournament format. Again, I'm going to recommend that because if you scratch a wrestler because of a medical condition, you're still allowed to substitute. If you do the weigh-in first and then the athlete doesn't pass the medical check, you can't substitute if you do it that way around. So just remember that if you're running that team format. So, and lastly, if a wrestler, if you have a 2-day tournament, team tournament, and a wrestler does not make weight on day 2, they are limited to only that higher weight class. So let's say on day 1, they were, their minimum weight was 132, which means they could wrestle 132 and 138. Day 2, they come in, they're a little bit heavier and can't make 132. They are only eligible at that second weight. And some of that information is in the FAQ. So that was my additions, Charlie.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. And we'll move on here, and I'll call on you again here before we turn it back over to Laura, just if necessary to add any additional information. Certified team lineups, the 21 participants in uniform, the student manager, the 3 coaches should be approved by the tournament manager prior to the start. I know that track wrestling really does the work to certify the postseason weight for each participant. There is an appeal process. So for a coach that would like to appeal where there was an injury and maybe not many weigh-ins for a particular student athlete after January 15th, that process is outlined in rules and policies, and so you can communicate that to your participants. And know that if there is the possibility of an injured or perhaps a COVID positive athlete who may be cleared after an early round of the tournament, that they should be on the 21 person roster that's going to advance through the tournament. They would be moved by proper documentation. We have a quarantine form that can be found in dashboards, or a physician's note that states very clearly that a participant is unable to participate. Once the injured student athlete is able to return, they would come in and only be able to replace the athlete that stepped in to that position for them on the roster. And we have got double information here, Susan. Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. In the individual tournament, should there be a need or desire to make a substitution, please know that once the tournament has been seeded, that is really the official start of the tournament. And so switching weight classes at that point is not allowed. There could be an exception or a change made if a wrestler cannot compete due to injury and there's proper medical documentation. If a replacement wrestler can be inserted into the tournament, the weight will be reseated, and if the wrestler scratches and there is no replacement, they'll reseed if the wrestler was a seated participant, and where there was a wrestler that was not seated, a bye will appear, and every effort should be made to balance the byes in the bracket. Talk a little bit about our medical protocols. Want to review and discuss the documents. There's emergency site plans. There's a transfer of care document. Make sure you're familiar with those. You're getting those to your site personnel and those who are boots on the ground running the tournament. Please differentiate between school sports medicine staff, that is the trainer that's going to travel or attend with their school or their team, versus the tournament staff who you have hired to represent the league and or the section in that event. Please know that in all cases, the section assigned medical provider will have the final say for those medical decisions. In many cases, it might be the athletic trainer of the site school. That may be the person that's providing coverage. If that is the case, they will be the medical personnel that would have the final say in that situation. And then no, return to play can happen with written approval from the appropriate healthcare professional. Your certified training staff, sports medicine staff, will know if that is them, or if a condition such as head, neck, or cervical injury must be evaluated by a physician before returning to participate. And just a few pieces of general information. If there are needs to possibly alter the section schedule, obviously there are a lot of people that need to be informed of that decision. And so work with the region secretary, host sites, because of other schedules that are taking place in the gym. It may not be just as easy as moving it to the same location the next day. So work with your region secretary and make together make the appropriate determination for any weather-related postponement. Also know that for merchandising and streaming, I would like to see a letter C there for meetings in the future. But for those that express interest in selling merchandise and or streaming the event, that must be approved at the region level for that to happen. So if you are a site that typically wouldn't have people coming to your facility streaming a variety of events, if somebody wants to show up and stream your team or individual wrestling tournament, please know that they do have to have permission and or some agreement with your region committee. With that, Quiz, anything else to add as we move towards wrap up here?
Well, Charlie, just this return to play sometimes is a little confusing because now, and correct me if I'm wrong, you just claimed or stated that a head, neck, or concussion injury can only be cleared by a doctor. Your training staff at the site cannot clear them to return to play, correct?
I would say that is correct. And there are cases after a diagnosed concussion where the transfer of care would go back to the certified athletic trainer and they would begin to manage that care. But on tournament day, if the trainer rules that there has been a concussion or concussion-like symptoms, we're going to need a physician to evaluate, or maybe I want to restate that. The trainer is going to need some time for that evaluation, and they may determine that the student is out for the remainder of the day, or they need to see a physician for further evaluation before clearance. But our trainer would be able to manage that. But if there was a forfeiture for by a student athlete for one of those injuries, I believe that the federation rule states pretty clearly for head, neck, cervical, and I might be getting out of my comfort zone talking about rules here.
All right, Charlie, are we ready to send it
Yeah.
Laura's way?
Is Laura ready?
I think so.
Laura's here.
All right, welcome, Laura.
Thanks, Charlie. Good afternoon, everyone. Want to jump in and just share some website information on where you can find information, as well as where you can put information for other folks. First of all, do make sure that you have a tournament personnel dashboard. If you are an AD and have set this up, a reminder that down at the bottom in the blue footer is where you can toggle between your two dashboards. Your tournament personnel dashboard is really where you'll find your information to run a tournament, compared to the information on your AD dashboard which is where you do your AD work. If you do not have a tournament personnel dashboard set up yet, the person to work with is your region secretary, as they will assign that to you. Once you have that region secretary dashboard, Susie, if you'll go ahead. You'll find a section on that tournament personnel dashboard labeled Section Tournament Management Resources, as the screenshot says. There's a folder on that, a button on that that says Winter Tournament Management Resources. And in that button, you'll find a folder for wrestling. That is where Susie, Charlie, and others within our office are putting the resources that you as the tournament director, tournament personnel, need to manage that tournament. This isn't where information for coaches go or fans or spectators. This is a folder just for those folks that are on this call. It is, for example, where Susie will put the link to this meeting after we're done. So whenever you're looking for those things that may have hit you in an email and you're saying, where are all of those? Your tournament personnel dashboard underneath section tournament management and then winter tournaments is where you'll find that information. Also on your tournament personnel dashboard, you have a button that says website help guide. I'm going to talk you through a few things on the next slides about where you should be putting information for other folks. All of those directions are behind this button. You'll find a sheet for each one of those things here. So website help guide is where you can go in and learn how to do things on the website as a tournament personnel person. Also on your tournament personnel dashboard, you'll find two buttons. One is a school directory and one is a coach directory. Behind each one of those, you'll find a number of filters. And in each of those areas is where you can pull a spreadsheet, a CSV, and or view contact for those folks that are in your tournament. So for example, when you're looking for the head coaches in section 6A, coach directory will filter that down and get you that information. As we think about adding information to the website, there are really three areas that you're responsible for. And again, Susie will share this slideshow out with you and you'll see directions for those. The first area is section event information that feeds to the public website from a number of places. Secondly, information for your participants. And then finally, brackets. In different sections at times, the tournament coordinator and or the region secretary takes care of each of these three things. So please make sure that you have worked with your region secretary to know what your responsibilities are in this area and which things they are taking care of. The very first one, for most of you, your region secretaries have taken care of this. Many of them added this last summer when they had availability to do so. So at this point, it may be checking to see that it's accurate. From your dashboard, you'll see a band that says fall, and behind that, you'll be able to get into the kind of all the backside information about your section tournament. That populates in a number of places across the website, from coach dashboards to AD dashboards to the public website. So when people are looking for what day is a tournament on, this is where they'll find that, and this is where you can fix and adjust that. And again, my guess is that many of your region secretaries have already done this. They were able to do this starting last summer, but for you to work with them and double check that would be important. The second piece is, the next slide shows you where you can find the instructions on how to do that. Again, behind that website help button, you'll find a page of instructions called section events, and that's where you can go through and double check and edit those. Now moving ahead, the second piece is adding information for participants within the tournament. So all of our coaches and ADs on their dashboard have a section for each sport they're in. So you see the example here for volleyball. There are three sections underneath each one of those. The left and the right sections, the activity and the state tournament, those are populated by staff within our office, and every wrestling coach and AD with wrestling across Minnesota sees the same things in the activity and state tournament resources. In the part behind the red, this is section specific. So when a coach or AD working in wrestling wants to find what we would say everything about wrestling, here is where they go, and you can populate that middle section. So when you have information for those coaches and ADs in your section that you want to share with them, the directions are down there at the bottom of adding a section event, and that will then populate this section for ADs and coaches only within your section. Again, these are probably things that 3 or 4 years ago you emailed to those coaches. 10 or 15 years ago, you dropped in the mail to those coaches and ADs. They're those documents that help you manage your tournament, and you need them to have that access. In today's world of so many emails and so much information, our real goal here is to put all of that information in for wrestling in one spot on the dashboard for both ADs and coaches. And again, that bottom section gives you the directions on how to add that resource or those resources for them. And then finally, brackets. Wrestling is a little bit different for brackets. We have both team and individual. Team brackets are managed within the Minnesota State High School League website. Susie has built out those brackets for you. Region secretaries have access to those, and then they in turn give access to anyone that needs it. So on your tournament personnel dashboard underneath bracket management, you should see any of the team tournaments that you're managing. If you do not see those team tournaments behind there, your region secretary is the person to check in with. And again, this is team brackets. And then finally, on the next slide, individual brackets, those are managed from within Track Wrestling. Our office will link those up in the right spots for folks on the website to be able to find those. But that information, again, will be from within Track, and John and Tony and others will be getting that to you. Charlie, I believe that's all I have, unless I have not seen the chat, if there's anything else to respond to or things that should go back to you.
Appreciate that, Laura. Thank you. And the website continues to be developed and improved and become a powerful tool. So just encourage you to use it in all of those ways, and train our coaches and even some of our ADs to engage with it appropriately. I did, while Laura was talking and I was paying a little bit of attention to her, I was able to find the language for the medical and injury default. So I'm just going to drop that language into chat. And this is also in your rules and policies, but it's federation language as well. So it's really found, it has its home in the NFHS rule book. So just want to provide clarification. We did send this communication out to schools shortly after the wrestling season started, right around the time competition started. But a wrestler who defaults due to a head, neck, cervical area injury must have, in quotes, physician's approval to resume participation in interscholastic activities. And that is again referenced NFHS Rule 8-2-4. Injuries that are non-head, neck, and cervical, a sprained ankle, a finger, an elbow. If the certified athletic trainer in their assessment feels that that participant can continue, they could make that determination for that wrestler moving forward. And we'll leave that to his or her professional judgment. So just wanted to share that with you all and maybe clean up some of that confusion.
And Charlie, I did make note in the chat that I will get all the resources updated and on their tournament management dashboards by midday tomorrow. I'm just a little behind the 8 ball there, but I'll get to it by midday tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, Susie.
Charlie, I do have one item that I forgot to mention during the track wrestling portion. Is this an okay time to?
It's a perfect time, John.
Okay, so coaches are gonna ask about a deadline to enter their weigh-in sheets and also their individual results. Both of those things have to be done by February 12th at 8 AM. Okay, and that's for both committing their weigh-in sheets and also entering all their individual match results. And the reason it's 8 AM is that's the day that Tony and I run the reports to send to all of you. So we'll put that in the cheat sheet as well, but I just wanted to make sure everybody heard that.
And John, a question to me in the chat around the meetings on January 6th and January 23rd for entering weigh-ins.
Yep.
And I will get an email out to everyone probably later today with the invites for those meetings. Will those be recorded, John?
Yeah, we'll record one or the other, I'm guessing, but
Okay.
yeah, it'll be recorded. And then also there's like an attendance module in there that we can use to figure out who attended and who didn't.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm hearing silence, and we'll welcome you to exit the meeting and say thanks again for your attendance and for your willingness to host these league-sponsored tournaments. You're very important to the work we do, and we can't express our appreciation enough for you. Have a great day, everybody.